When most people picture a dragon, they think of something straight out of fantasy nightmares. Huge wings, scales of armor, fire pouring out of its mouth, maybe even a hoard of gold somewhere. But in 2010, DreamWorks said, nah, what if our dragon was basically a giant flying cat? And that's Toothless, the Night Fury, a creature that broke almost every classic dragon rule, and somehow became one of the most beloved animated characters of all time. But here's the thing, Toothless isn't scary because of its size, and he's not lovable because of how much fire he can breathe. He's lovable because he feels alive. He feels like a pet you already know, a cat, a dog, sometimes even a bird. And that design choice, mixing predator with pet, is exactly why Toothless worked. Dragons have always been designed to intimidate. Take Smaug in The Hobbit. He's this mountain-sized, fire-breathing nightmare covered in scales and spikes. Or Drogon in Game of Thrones. Basically, a living nuclear weapon with wings. Even in old European mythology, dragons were always beasts to be slayed, not befriended. So imagine you're sitting down for How to Train Your Dragon, expecting the usual, some giant armored lizard with teeth longer than your arm, and then you meet Toothless, who's smooth, rounded, and almost plush. Instead of jagged scales, he's got soft textures. Instead of dagger eyes, he's got these massive, round pupils that shift like a cat's. And instead of lumbering like a monster, he's crouching, tilting his head, and flicking his ears. It's not a dragon out of mythology, it's something familiar, something you recognize. Toothless isn't just a dragon, he's basically every pet you've ever loved rolled into one. The animators studied cats for his head tilts, his ear flicks, and that stalking posture he does right before pouncing. Look at the way he slinks down to the ground when he's suspicious. It's straight out of a cat hunting a toy. But then when he's bounding around the clearing with Hiccup, that's pure Labrador energy. The tail wagging, the playful hops, even the way he flops down on his belly when he's comfortable. And the best part, they didn't hide it. There's literally a scene where he's chasing a spot of light around the cove like a cat chasing a laser pointer. That's not some fantasy creature behavior. That's your pet losing their mind over a flashlight. By mixing predator movements with pet quirks, Toothless ended up being both dangerous and familiar. A dragon you could believe would torch an entire fleet, but curl up next to you on the couch. Toothless doesn't talk, doesn't have dialogue, but he doesn't need it, because his eyes and body language carry more emotion than most side characters in the film. The animators leaned into something subtle but powerful. Pupil dilation, cats do it. When they're curious, their pupils widen. When they're hunting, they narrow the slits. Toothless does the same thing. Take the first touch moment. When Hiccup reaches out his hand, Toothless's pupils widen just before he leans in. That's trust. That's him saying without words, I don't see you as prey anymore. And it's not just the eyes. His whole body talks. The way his tail lashes when he's annoyed, the way he crouches when he's ready to pounce, or the way he collapses flat on his belly when he's relaxed. He communicates like an animal we already know, which means the audience doesn't just watch Toothless, we read him. And that makes every little twitch feel alive. And it's not just visuals. Sound design is a huge part of why Toothless feels real. Most dragons roar. Smaug roars, Drogon roars, even the animated ones like Maleficent's dragon all sound like movie monsters. Toothless, he chirps, he purrs, he growls in ways that feels more like a cat or a dog than a dragon. Fun fact, the sound designers actually layered together noises from cats, dogs, horses, and even dolphins. So when Toothless snorts or trills at Hiccup, you're not hearing fantasy dragon noises. You're hearing something you've probably heard in real life from your own pets. That's why it works. It's familiar. You instinctively know what he's feeling. Curious, annoyed, playful, without even a single line of dialogue. But here's the genius balance. Toothless is still terrifying. Remember, the Night Fury is introduced as the ultimate predator. Strike from the sky, never be seen. He's feared by everyone in Berk before Hiccup even meets him. So on one hand, got this cat-like, goofy, almost plush-looking creature. On the other, you've got a dragon that can blow ships out of water in seconds. That contrast is what makes him fascinating. He's adorable one second, deadly the next, and the movie never lets you forget either side. Look at the opening raids. The Night Fury's blast is treated like a horror movie jump scare. But minutes later, you're watching him roll on his back like a puppy. He's not one or the other, he's both. And that's what makes Toothless unique. Of course, the first flight scene is where everything comes together. The design choices, the eyes, the wings, the tail, the playful animal behaviors, all explode into this moment where Toothless finally soars with Hiccup. Watch how his wings stretch and flex. They're not stiff, they're alive. Every tilt, every roll, every dive feels like a creature in control of his body, not just an animated prop. And because his design reads both powerful and playful, the design doesn't just feel epic, it feels emotional. It's freedom for both Toothless and Hiccup. And you believe it, because now, Toothless doesn't just look like a dragon, he looks like a companion. One of the best tests of a character's design is whether it still works years later, and Toothless, he's only got better. In How to Train Your Dragon 2, he matures. He's bigger, sleeker, more like an apex predator, but he never loses the cat-like quirks, the tail flicks, the playful moments. Even the awkward, goofy mating stance in How to Train Your Dragon 2 reminds us he's still Toothless. And by How to Train Your Dragon 3, when he becomes the alpha, the design has to balance power with vulnerability. He's majestic. He's still the same creature who tilts his head at Hiccup like a curious cat. That's rare in animation. Characters often lose what makes them relatable as stories scale up. Toothless never did. So why did this rule-breaking dragon work so well? Because Toothless wasn't designed to be a monster. He was designed to be a mirror. He reflects Hiccup's growth. Wild at first, cautious, then loyal, then free. Every stage of Toothless is a stage of Hiccup. And by grounding him in familiar, pet-like behaviors, the audience doesn't just watch Hiccup bond with a dragon, we bond with one too. Toothless doesn't war wisdom, like Smaug or like Drogon. He acts like something we know, something we love. That's why Toothless became timeless. Toothless doesn't just look like a dragon we grew up with. He looks like a pet you'd risk everything to protect. He doesn't just breathe fire, he breathes personality. And that's the secret. By breaking every design rule and mixing menace with mischief, Toothless became more than a dragon. He became one of the most iconic creatures in animation.